In this video, we'll discuss the central role of targeting parenting risks and resources when treating parental burnout, and how to prioritize which risks and resources to focus on. At the center of treating burned out parents, whether this treatment occurs individually or with a group, lies the balance of risks and resources we presented in the video on the etiology of parental burnout. The common goal for any form of treatment or prevention strategy is to restore the equilibrium of the parent's balance, regardless of which specific risk factors and resources it includes. We need to remember that every instance of burnout has its own history, and therefore the risks and resources that make up the balance will vary from one parent to another. But what is common across burnout parents is that their balance of risks and resources is no longer stable. It's in a state of disequilibrium. Or when talking from a preventive perspective, it's in the process of becoming unstable and unbalanced, and we are going to try to reestablish an equilibrium. It's therefore essential to carry out with each patient the balance test that was presented in Module 1. The test allows both you and the parent to understand the risks and resources specific to that particular parent. There are 4 possible courses of action for restoring equilibrium to the scale. These 4 strategies are not mutually exclusive, but should be combined to restore or improve the equilibrium of the parental balance. These 4 strategies consist of eliminating certain risks or stressors, reducing the burden of certain stressors, making better use of resources that are already present, and adding new resources. So let's now review these 4 approaches. We'll start with the first strategy, eliminating risks and stressors. So some stressors are present in the balance but can be removed either permanently or momentarily. Here's an example. Let's imagine I have 3 children, each of whom does 3 extracurricular activities. Often stressors have accumulated without us noticing or mobilizing resources to counterbalance their burden. My first kid was born, I wanted to give her the opportunity to do music, sports, and Girl Scouts. And then when I have my second kid, I want to make sure I don't deprive him of what I offer to his sister, and so on, until I have a lot of stressors, tasks, and responsibilities that have accumulated on one side of my balance, and I haven't always taken the time to put in place the corresponding resources. So an example of eliminating unnecessary stressors would be to allow each child to do 1 or 2 extracurricular activities and no more. The second approach has to do with reducing the burden of certain stressors. These are stressors that cannot currently be eliminated from the parental balance, but their weight, their burden could be lightened. Let us take the example of a parent whose child has major difficulties at school. Completing homework is a big source of everyday stress. It leads to a lot of frustration for the child who has no desire to do their homework, and for the parent who is worried about their child's academic and professional future. The time spent doing homework becomes a complicated moment every day. It usually ends with shouting, blaming, and conflicts. Of course, the stressor cannot be eliminated, but it can be lightened, such as by having the child do their homework at the supervised study hall at school, or by speaking with the teacher and seeing if they support adjusting the nature and number of homework assignments. So the third approach involves making better use of resources that are already present. The balance test sometimes allows parents to realize that they already have resources, sometimes a good number of them, but they are not using these resources or not taking advantage of them as much as they could be. A classic example is the presence of the spouse. The parent recognizes that their spouse is present, but the way in which they call on the spouse for concrete help or for emotional support is far less than the spouse could offer or even would like to offer. The parent may be resistant to asking for help because it can be seen as an admission of weakness or of losing face, of giving power back to the other person. Asking for help could be threatening to a parent's self-image if they see themselves as strong-willed and braved, or they might think that they don't have the right to ask for help because they were the one who wanted a big family. So in general, there can be a lot of internal obstacles that are keeping parents from asking those close to them to help out. Another classic example of making better use of an already there resource is also to recognize that we have helpful children, but we don't ask them to be self-sufficient or ask them for help. A lot of parents also face a lot of internal resistance to this idea. Some parents think that household tasks are the responsibility of the parents and not of the children. Some parents think that if the tasks are completed by the children, then they'll be done less well than if the parents had completed them themselves. For example, if the children are asked to put away their laundry, it's possible that the children will stack them haphazardly. Some parents still feel that their children are not old enough to accomplish certain tasks, or that the children should not be forced to do tasks, especially if the parent is not or is no longer able to do the task themselves. And now the fourth and final strategy for readjusting a parent's balance is to add new resources that are not yet present. Through the parenting balance test, we might see that the number of available resources is quite limited for some parents. Then it might be necessary to add new resources. If we take again the example of the parent who has a child with educational difficulties, adding a new resource could involve finding someone who can sit with the child and help them do their homework several times a week. This could be a student, a retired neighbor, a relative. Adding resources often requires being creative and being able to let go and give up control a little bit as a parent. We've just gone over the 4 strategies that should be combined to restore the equilibrium of the parental balance. But where should we start? It's not possible to work on all risks and resources at once, and the number of risks and resources can be very large. We will therefore always start by identifying which components of the balance we can work on and will work on during treatment. So how do we do this concretely? In truth, not all of the factors that make up the parental balance are equivalent. And we'll need to ask ourselves a number of questions to choose which factor or factors we will focus on during treatment. The first question to ask, is the factor malleable? Some stressors in the parental balance are not malleable at all. This is the case, for example, with our personality traits, but also with our personal life history, such as what we experienced with our own parents. The next question, is the factor controllable? For example, increasing support from the spouse is at first glance a malleable factor, but it can be something that's out of the control of the parent if their partner does not want to change their habits at all, or if their partner works several days a week abroad, such as if they're a long-haul truck driver or an airplane pilot, for example. The third question, does the factor have a good cost-benefit ratio? By this, I mean that some factors are controllable and malleable, but changing them will require so much time and energy that the benefit will not be worth it. For example, if I have to spend too much energy convincing my partner to become more involved as a parent, and the result is not guaranteed, then this factor may not be considered cost-effective. The next question, is the parent sensitive to this factor? Each parent will be more or less sensitive to the presence of certain factors or resources in their personal balance. When factors have equal malleability, controllability, and cost-benefit ratio, you should always prefer a factor that really matters to the parent. This increases the parent's motivation to engage in the intervention. For example, if the parent themselves experienced learning disabilities at school, the parent may be very sensitive to the presence of academic difficulties for their child. This stressor in the parent's balance should therefore be a priority. And then the last question, can the factor have a domino effect? For some stressors, when they disappear or diminish, and vice versa for resources, when they are added or better utilized, then these can have a cascading positive effect. For example, if the parent succeeds in lessening how much they demand of themselves as a parent, so lessening their perfectionism, having slightly lower standards, they will de facto also encourage more independence from their children, such as by accepting that their child does their own laundry and folds it imperfectly. And they also de facto accept more support from their partner, thus reclaiming quality time alone or with their children. So let's summarize all of this. One way to work concretely with parents during treatment is to have them complete the balance test using the material given to you previously in this training, so the cards and the drawing of the balance. You'll take a photo of the balance the parent put together at the beginning of treatment to keep a record. Then you'll